Alright guys, so this is the Node.js workshop. I'll first go over just roughly what we'll be building the server around and yeah, the website we're going to be building it for. So I've created this really simple movie rank predictor which claims to rank and predict how much you'd like movies out of 10 of them. So you can enter your name in here and it will give you a list of rankings that it thinks it predicts for you. It's completely random. It's nothing like special, the actual algorithm. I just randomly sorted this list. But anyway, it's a good way to introduce this server building for you and keep the focus on the server, not the complicated website. So first off, things to note about the website to keep in mind for when we build the server here is that this is an image, so we'll need to serve that using Node.js in the server. And this list here that appears when you load the page isn't going to be on the client file until it's requested from the server using Ajax. And lastly, your name here, or whatever you type in, okay, this string will need to be saved onto the server. And so yeah, we'll be implementing all these things and serving this website now. So I'll start the presentation. So the required files for this workshop and installations. So obviously you're going to need Node.js, and you can follow the link to this on these slides to download it. It's pretty easy to install. It has all the instructions there. If you need any help though, you can DM me. The other thing is, the node server complete zip file contains all the files you need. So I can show that now. So it includes the server that's completed that we're going to be building now. I'll start from an empty one for the workshop. It also includes the client file and the web page and that image that we saw. So yeah. Also, if you need the slides or the node server zip file, it can be found under workshops on this uLearn. For David's class, I think only, maybe also Alina's. So the outline, I'm just going to give you a brief introduction to Node, and then I'm going to show you how to start building this server, how to read in data and files from a directory, how to serve files using Node, so all the ones I mentioned that we need, so like the JPEG, the JS files, and how to use Ajax get and post requests with Node.js, and then some server responses and using DOM to act on the website after you get those responses. So what is Node.js? It's an open source cross-platform backend JavaScript runtime environment that executes JavaScript code outside a web browser. It's open source, it's cross-platform, so it works on different OSs and browsers. It's asynchronous, single-threaded, and it's server-side. So to create the Node.js server, you actually need to use the HTTP module. So we will start with that. So here I have an empty server.js file, empty apart from a list of movies that we have on the server. So yeah, like I said, the first thing you need to create is a constant variable. You can call it HTTP, and you need to require the module HTTP. And this will allow us to create a server. And so this module allows us to use the function .createServer, which obviously creates our server. And in the .createServer function, it has an anonymous function with two parameters, request and response. I mean, they can be called whatever you want, but you should probably make them at least something similar to request and response, because that's what they represent. They represent the request and response objects. And we also need to set the server port for where it's listening. So let's first create that server variable. The request object parameter, and then we will fill this in the following slides. I'll show you what goes in there and the meat of the server, I guess. And we need to set where the server is listening, which port. So we're going to do 3000 because that's the local port, so I can so you can run it on your web browser easily. And we're also just going to give a console.log here so that we know when the server starts running, and we can give a link here to the localhost IP so that we can easily click it and get to the website. I can just show you quickly what that looks like. So stop the server here. Node server. That's how you run it. Prints out server running at HTTP, and you can follow that link, and that gets us to the website. Alright, so we have it listening. We've created the server variable. Now I'll quickly go over, before we fill it all in, some useful other modules that you're probably going to want on your server files. So the first you might want is path. This module basically allows you to more easily and cleanly work with like complex directories. Like if you have tons of directories inside your inside and around your server file that have different things you want to import or load, it's useful to have this path module. It allows you just to save like save different like directories as strings and stuff like that, and use them to locate files. The one we're going to be using though is this fs module, and so it allows us to read and write and manipulate the files in our current directory, and so you use it as such. If you want to read just one file that's currently in your directory, you just do fs.readFile, the name of the file, the type, and then you do an anonymous function with this is an error parameter that, you know, if something goes wrong, it will be set to true, and if something goes wrong, then the data will be loaded into this parameter. And this function is if you want to read in like an entire directory, entire folder of files, you'd use .reader, and with the directory path and the function there. But we'll just be using the read file here to, I think 3 times we'll probably be using it. We won't implement any of the, we won't read in files right now, but we can just import that module so when we need it. So that's there, and that's good. Next is if we want to serve data with NodeJS. So we use the method function to determine the request type. So the request would be that parameter in the anonymous function of the server variable, and we can use .method on it and check if it equals get or post, or if you want to even put. And to check the location where that request is coming from, use the .url, and this allows us to differentiate what kind of requests we're going to be receiving and handle them differently, right? Alright, so we will be first console.logging the URL here, just so we know we have a console log of what URLs are getting sent to the server, so we can kind of track our inputs to it. So first thing is create an if statement, request.method. Request.method, and we'll check if it is equal to get. And if it is, we will first check, the first URL we check is if it's the home page, which is just which could just be a slash, or it could be a index HTML file. So it could either be, for our home page, it could be asking for the basically no query, which is just a slash, or it could be asking for, what is this file, index.html, which is our HTML file. First thing I guess we'll set up is this this type of URL. So we want to load our home page, which will be our index.html file. So we'll need to use the fs module to read file index.html, which is the name of it, and we'll give it the function. We won't give it a type because it should automatically detect one, and type in the anonymous function as such. And first we will check if an error had occurred, and if it has, we will be setting the status code. So basically, when you respond from the server, before you do so, you're going to want to set two things. You're going to want to set the status code, which basically is like the error code, or lack of error code. It's just like it's a status code. it shows whether or not the response is a good one, like a positive, everything's gone through correctly, or whether it's bad and it's an error. So 200 is the one that means it's good and it's gone through, and we're going to be using for the error, we're going to be using 500 as it's not good, it's an error, 500 error. And then the other thing you want to set usually, if it's not an error, is the header. So that basically tells what type of content you're sending back in the response. And then you can send the response with .end. So we'll send the response of the error back with just some kind of message here saying what went wrong. So error reading file, and return. And then if nothing goes wrong, we will respond with a positive status code. Set the header type to what we're sending back, which is a text/HTML type of file. And then our response.end, this is sending. What are we sending? Well, it's not an error, which means we can send data. So that is the file read in to that parameter. Alright, so next we will check for another type oh, excuse me, another location of the request. So the next thing is the client.js file. So if it's when we load our website like this, right, it's going to be going into, we just gave it the HTML page, and when we give it the HTML page, it's going to read it and it's going to find this script code right here, right? It's going to try to load something called client.js, and so that will send a a request, a GET request to our server under the URL /client.js. Okay, so we need to be able to give it the client.js file. So we use the same read file function here, and client.js is what it's called. Get our function parameters, and again we check for an error. Same way. I'm actually going to copy this like that. Where did I copy? There we go. So yeah, we do the same thing, just error reading file, and if it's not an error, we again set the status code to be 200, and we set the header. Oh, this shouldn't be head. This should be header. Set the header to content type, and that content type will be application/JavaScript. And then lastly, we send the response back with the .end function. And again, we're sending data back. So the next location of request will be this image here, right? So it's going to load in, and in the HTML, it will read this line in image source equals image.jpg, and it will go, what the hell is this, and send a GET request to the server with the location of /image.jpg. Things like that, right? Yeah. Okay. And again, same exact thing, except this time we're loading in the image. So I'm just going to copy this entire thing and edit it to make it faster. Oh fuck, what did I do? I'm missing this. There we go. Okay, so again here we are setting the status code to 500. If it goes wrong, say that it's an error. But this time, instead of the header content being JavaScript, we would like it to be image/JPEG. And again, we send back the data. And this time it's the image back to the website. Okay, and so lastly, before we move on to the next part of the outline, we are handling all GET requests in here, right? So if we need a POST request, we're gonna have to check for that as well. And so we'll do that just after the get if ends. So we'll do else if request dot method, right? What type of request is it? It is post. That would be handled in here. And so we'll fill that in once we need to. Alright, so now we're going to I'll just show you how Ajax and GET post requests interact with the server. So, I mean, hopefully you guys know how to use Ajax, but just a reminder, you'd create a request with let request equals new XML HTTP request. So this would be done on the client side. And then you open the request and give it which type of method it is, get or post, and the query, set it to true, and then request.send, and data if it's a post request, and this would just be empty if it's a get request. So I'll show you how that is used in this project. So here is our client .js. So this is loaded. This is the thing that we just served here. So this is loaded in. It starts with an empty list of movies, and the first thing it does is it sends a GET request for movies. And so it basically wants the list of movies that we have on the server right here. So we create the request to on steady rate change equals this anonymous function, and you open it as a get because we want get, and then we specify the URL. And so I just did /movies, so we're going to send a /movies as the get request to the server, and we reset the request type to accept application.json files, and we send that over. And so if it comes back with a positive status codes, then we update this movie variable to the parsed response text, which will be that list right here, stringified. And then from there, we want to display it here, right? When we load the page, we want the list to be displayed as so. So we go through each movie in the movies list that we just got from the server, and we create a new list item and set the content of that to be the name of the movie, and then we append it to the movie list that's on the HTML here. Okay, so we have the movie list request, AJAX request from the client, so we need to be able to handle that in the server. So that would go under our get if statement here, and we'll add on another else if to check for that request. So the URL we set was /movies. Okay, so we need to check for /movies. Make sure I'm recording. Okay, I'm recording. Check for /movies, and what do we want to do here? Well, we'll create just a variable called data, and what are we sending over? Well, we're trying to send over this list of movies, so we'll set data to movies, and then we will set the response status code to 200. This header content type to application/JSON. Alright, that was the type we're sending over. And then once we do the end function to send it over, we need to json.stringify. So this packages it up into JSON so that it can be sent over and parsed out. Alright, and that's that. And that's how you handle a AJAX GET request. So let's see, what shall we do next? We can actually do a post request next. So when we enter a name here, not only does it update this header with your name and then this string. This is predicted movie ranking. Lucas's predicted movie ranking. It also saves your name on the server. And to do that, we'll use an AJAX post request. So I'll show you where that happens. So this button here, this enter button has the ID of enter button, and so we use DOM to access it, and then we create an on-click function for it and check if the input element, so it has an ID name, if its value is nothing, or if it's not nothing, then we want to update that title with the name inside of it, like I showed, and we want to save the name. Okay, so we call this save name function that I created, and we call it with whatever is in that text box and the value of it. And so what that save name function does is it sends a post request to the server with the name. So again, just like in any other AJAX XML HTTP request, you use the variable and the .onSteadyRate onReady state change is equal to this anonymous function, and you want to open with post this time, and the URL we're going to do is /name true request set header content type application.json, and this time we're actually going to be, when we send over the request, we'll be sending it a stringified piece of data, in this case the name that's given to this function. And then when it comes back as completed, we just print out what it says. You don't need to handle, you don't technically need to handle anything in here. This is just to make sure that the post request was received and the variable on the server was updated. Alright, so we handle our post request in here, so we'll create the first if statement to check the URL. And that was /name. So if the request URL is /name, what do we want to do? First, so this part of it, it looks a bit weird how we capture the data from the post request, but bear with me here. So we want to create a variable that will capture the data, and it's going to be a string. So we'll start it off as empty, and then we use request and then the .on function, data. When data is coming in, take it chunk by chunk and append it to the data variable, and then we use the request .on function again, but this time on end when it is finished. Oops, missing a variable there. On end, simply update our user where we're gonna save it. So actually I have to create here a variable to capture this current user. So we'll call it username, starts off as empty, and oops, we will be updating it here. So once data has been read into the variable here, we want to update our global variable for the current username, and we parse out that data variable. And just like that. Okay. So that basically allows us to save the username on the server. So I don't do anything with it in this project here, but it shows you that how you could, if like let's say you wanted to store all the users ever entered, right? Then you could have like a list on your server, and whenever someone hits this button with a name in there, then you send a post request with that name, and instead of just updating a single string variable, you could add that name to a list, and then maybe at somewhere you could like print out, if you wanted to show all the users for some reason on the website, you could, right? You could use the server to print out all the users ever entered into that input box, using our post requests and get requests. So that's the AJAX interaction, and server responses and DOM. So I already showed you some of that with how we printed out that list. Yeah, I think we already kind of covered this stuff, but I can show you again. In our client.js file, when we received the list of movies back, we used DOM to add them all to this list. And of course, I'm using DOM for all this stuff, so when I enter something here, it basically prints out onto the list here using DOM. I mean, all these functions you don't really need to look at. You can if you want. It's in the given files on CUlearn. Here's the really interesting algorithm to predict your rankings of the movies. It's literally just randomly shuffling that that list that it got from the server and then printing it out here. So this is where it gets updated. Again, using DOM to create list items and setting their text content and then appending them to the list. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Thanks guys for watching. If you have any questions, you can DM me on the Discord.